You're listening to the Uplevel Your Online Business Show, where wealth is empowering, purpose is crucial, and high vibes are non-negotiable. And now, here's your host, certified business coach and practical woo strategist, Sara J Loureiro.
Hey you, and welcome back to another episode of the Uplevel Your Online Business Show. I had the idea to do this podcast episode after a series of conversations with some of my closest friends and who are also entrepreneurs. And I just know that so many of you need to hear this. And I also know that a lot of this can be very controversial for, most of society, because we are taught that we need to keep friendships and that we need to, defend friendships and loyalty to friendships and relationships at all costs. And it's not to say that I'm trying to get everyone to burn all your bridges, but really, I hope that this episode helps you to take a very close look at the people that you are keeping close to you in your life and truly questioning whether or not they really deserve the placeholder that you are giving them. And sometimes we can give people specific placeholders in our lives, not because we align with them, but simply because we were taught that's what we should do. This episode also comes at a time that's super healing for me because I have astronomically increased my income this year. And with that has also been just a very eye-opening experience into the company that I keep and the standards that I set for the company that I keep and how truly when the way that we do one thing is the way that we do everything. And I can't wait to hear what you guys think of this episode. So without further ado, let's talk about how to really understand what your core values are in order that you can realign your friendships to further excel in your business. And so what I find personally is that when we grow up in a specific environment, whether it's a cultural environment or whether it's a family environment or even a school environment, we tend to just naturally make friendships and naturally get very close to people. And it's usually because of similarities in upbringing, right? It's because of similarities in our upbringing, in our education, in what the types of things that we enjoy, the things that we have in common, right? Usually that's how we create our friendship circles. And when we go through up levels within our own lives, I'm sure that you've probably done this, you realize that some of your friends just can't stay because they represent a version of you that no longer exists. And so the ways that you identified with them and the ways that you allowed yourself to be really close with them were also the aspects of yourself that you knew that you needed to heal and that you knew that you needed to grow out of. And so unfortunately, what ends up happening with a lot of those relationships and a lot of those friendships is you outgrow them. And it can become really painful to outgrow relationships and to outgrow friendships because sometimes the other person doesn't even know what hit them. They're like, well, what did I do wrong? Why did you change? And everything just feels so different for them as well. But if they're not going to rise up with you, and if they're going to hold on to a lot of the toxic patterns and behaviors that they've always known because they feel really comfortable with them, then you have to wish them well and you have to move to another stage. I am going to be talking about that, but more so what I want to talk about is aligning your friendships with your core values. Because I think that as we grow and as we grow as entrepreneurs, we don't do that enough. And so it's one thing to outgrow relationships, but then I think it's another thing entirely. And this is something that I really learned this year after, once again, astronomically growing my income, that no one ever taught me. And I had to learn it the hard way. And I had to really raise my standards for who I wanted to have in my life. And I knew that I couldn't build the business that I built this year without raising those standards. Because by raising those standards, I also so much more heavily regulated my nervous system to a place where even the things that used to make me anxious even last year are no longer making me anxious. I'm no longer getting triggered. And that is also because I've really raised the bar in terms of the types of people that I want to keep and the types of people that I want to surround myself with. And so a lot of this has come about from really bad hires that I've made in my business over the past year, and just understanding where things align and where things don't align, and also understanding that just because someone really likes you and just because you can kind of get along with them doesn't necessarily mean that they should be a part of your life or that they should be a part of your closer circles. And once you have a higher standard for yourself for your friendships, it's not like you're going to get rid of all of your friendships and burn a whole bunch of bridges. But what you're going to start to understand is that you have specific friends who are there for your highest good and who can support you and you can lean on and who see and value everything that you're growing into. And then this is also what ultimately happened with me, is you will also have friends who are just kind of there because you have something in common with them, but that thing in common with them is no longer aligning to where you want to go. And one of the most important things that I was told this year by one of my mentors was that I deserve to have really high standards for the company that I keep. And it really hit me when he said that, because I had to really check myself. I had to take a step back and I had to ask myself, where in my life have I been lowering my standards in terms of my relationships? Because remember, the way that we do one thing is the way that we do everything. So where in my life have I been lowering my standards in terms of my relationships? And then it just really started to hit me that because of the fact that I have been someone who's relatively successful and I've excelled academically, I tend to really enable people and say, okay, well, I don't deserve all of these really great things that I've created for myself. So therefore, if someone treats me that way, or if someone hints at that, or hints at that lack of deserving, or hints at their victimization, I automatically enable that type of behavior, or I would automatically enable that type of behavior. And I'd feel like I would need to owe them something because of the fact that I became so successful. Because in my head, I still had that idea and I still held on to that limiting belief that my success equals someone else's lack thereof. And I didn't understand how I was allowing myself to become surrounded by this. And eventually what ended up happening was I would hire, and I know that this sometimes sounds really crazy to me, but it was a really, really great wake-up call, because I would hire people to do them a favor. And I started to see that a lot of my hires were, oh, well, I really want to help this person. I really want to help this person do something better with their lives. It was this act of saviorism that was inside of me. And this is so common in women, and especially empathetic women, and especially very successful empathetic women, where we tend to view a lot of our relationships almost as projects, but also as like good deeds. And I'm sure that not all of your relationships are like this, but even if you're listening to this, I bet that you have a few friendships or relationships in your life where you are that type of savior. You are the rescuer in the relationship. And this all ended up falling into my face because I was trying to build a business with really high standards and a business where other people upheld the same standards as me. Yet I wasn't hiring people at that level of high standard that I required from myself. And so what ended up happening, and this happens in every single relationship when you become the rescuer, is I ended up taking on more work, and I ended up taking on the work that I would pay other people to do because I didn't feel like it was fair for me to be in the position of success when I saw other people struggling. And it all became out of this place of unworthiness and this place of deeply feeling like I didn't deserve where I was at. And it really took my mentor, it really took my business coach to tell me, hey, you actually deserve an A+ team. And I think that you're a really great person. And I can see all of the success that you've had, but I also see all the hard work that you put into it. I see all the risk that you took with this. So why not give yourself an A+ team? And that just shook me to the core, because it also made me feel bad even for myself, because I was just like, why do I continuously do this to myself? Why have I allowed this to go on for so long? Why am I continuing to do this? And so from that point forward, I knew that I needed to make a change, and I needed to make a change in terms of my behaviors. And it was so hard to do, because once you need to change your behavior, especially around other people, you know that other people aren't going to like it. You know that the people who benefited from you victimizing them are going to be the people who lash out first. And this is exactly what ended up happening. So people who felt like I owed them something would come back to me and feel like, well, you owed me this, regardless of whether or not it was in a contract, regardless of whether or not it was even spoken. It was this entitlement that people who tend to victimize themselves have that I became approached with. And it was so incredibly painful, especially as a people pleaser, where I just needed to say, no, you're not entitled to that. These are my standards. This is the way that I'm going to behave in my own life. This is the way that I'm going to behave in my own business. And from increasing those standards, you guys, I've just found this really amazing new freedom where I don't care anymore about how much I please other people, because pleasing myself and pleasing my mission and pleasing my vision for my life and for my business and for my clients is just so much more important. And I understand now that nothing can come higher than that. And not to mention, when you stop becoming the rescuer, when you stop becoming the savior, when you stop becoming the person who is just constantly trying to fix and help other people, you give them permission to fix and help themselves. So in a way, it's also very empowering. And sure, there's so many people who just will never understand that, will always put themselves in victim mode. But there will be people who do learn from these types of experiences as well. And from having all of these experiences, I've started to identify core values that I have, and how those core values that I have sometimes do not align with other people's core values. Because sometimes, let's be honest, you can be your highest self and someone else can be their highest self, and you still won't get along. You still will clash. And I actually had a team member who started working with me, like so excited to work with me, and signed a 1-month contract. And on the first day of her contract, she just, had so much going on within her own life, and she was so afraid of taking on more responsibility that she just quit on the spot. And it was tough for me. It was really tough for me because she left me with a whole bunch of work to do the day after. I literally was going to Paris, I think a few days after she quit on the spot. And she told me, I just can't go on and I can't fulfill this contract because my core value is integrity, and I need to be in integrity with myself. And I found it really interesting because one of my core values is commitment. And so for me, it's so much more important to commit and follow through on something that you said that you were going to do versus quit on the spot because something felt like it didn't align within that moment. And what I realized from that point onwards was we can be cordial with each other, but we can't be friends. And that's totally fine because our core values are different. What we ultimately value in our lives and the thing that comes as the highest priority is different for each of us. Is one of my core values integrity within myself? Yeah, probably. But in that specific situation, I probably would have valued commitment over the integrity of what I was feeling in that specific moment. And that's where there's really no right or wrong. She was right within her own life. I was right within my life. But we had to ultimately sever that relationship because moving forward, I don't want those types of people in my life. And she probably doesn't want that either. So within that and kind of having those lessons, I've started to identify what my core values are and who is going to surround me with and ultimately whoever surrounds me needs to possess very similar core values. And of course, this is different with family members. I really feel like family is a completely different topic here, but I'm specifically talking about people that you get to choose whether or not you can have in your life. So whether that is a family member or not, that's totally up to you. But I've started to define what a lot of my core values are, both for my business and for my personal life. And one of my core values is commitment. And so committing to what I say I'm going to do is very, very important to me. And so if someone else doesn't align with that sense of commitment, then they're probably not going to be on my team. And they're probably not going to be in my close circle of friends, because commitment is huge to me. I follow through with things that I say that I'm going to do. I commit to contracts. And if I can't commit to a full contract with someone, I need to give them ample notice. That's just something that I align with so heavily within my own life. Another really interesting core value that came up for me as I was really reflecting on all of this is health. I really highly value my health. And as I've been looking at a few different relationships and business partnerships that I've had over this past year, what I've noticed about some people who have not aligned and have not been the best fit have been people who don't care about their health and people who don't prioritize their health. And it is a true mismatch. And although, sure, can I have friends who don't care about their health? Of course. But within my closer partnerships, it is very important to me that we prioritize our well-being, and we prioritize our longevity, and we prioritize what we feed ourselves. And that might sound judgmental to you, and that's okay, because maybe that's not one of your core values, and maybe your core value is integrity and it isn't commitment. And I think that there's space for all of those things to coexist. However, where I would drive the boundary with that is understanding that just because someone else doesn't see something as a priority doesn't mean that I need to give them access to my life. Or also, one step further, it doesn't mean that I need to give them access to my close circle of friends or to being on my team. Because if I want to grow a list of A-list team members, that's one of the values that I need to have all of my team members to have, is to value their health, prioritize themselves. Another core value that I've really identified within myself is speed. And this is actually really, really interesting to me because I didn't realize that this was a core value for me. And the way that it showed up for me was in business, when my clients just automatically know that I have a certain speed to get back to them. So I will never take days to get back to a client. It would never happen. And if I'm in a conversation with a client about a specific topic, I will wait until that topic is done. I will wait until that conversation is finished before I move on to something else. And speed and efficiency are huge for me. They're huge core values for me. And this is probably one of the biggest reasons why I've gotten to where I've gotten to in terms of the success of my business. I really do feel like it's been commitment and speed and efficiency as identified as core values that have allowed me to kind of like stick with what I'm doing and also do it at a pace that feels like I'm gaining traction relatively quickly so that I compound and I quantum leap in everything that I'm doing. And when I started realizing that I had people on my team who weren't as speedy as I was, and it didn't even need to be as speedy as I am, because I understand that sometimes I have the speed of a lunatic. But when I realized that there were some people on my team who did not value that, who did not value speed in terms of their time, that's when I realized, and I really had to question, do I want these people on my team? Do I want someone on my team who doesn't get back to me in over a day? Because how is that going to feel for my client? How is that going to feel? And how is that going to create less of a compounding effect in the business and in the success of a business if someone does not take, or someone takes over a day to get back to me? And that has been a really interesting realization for me, because now I only hire people who have that priority in place. So if you're not getting back to me within days, when I need you to review something for my social media or when you need to review something for clients, you're probably not a great fit for my company. And that is totally fine. Once again, I'm sure that there are other companies that value other things over speed, but that is one thing that I cannot go back on because that is a core value for me and the way that my team functions and operates. Another really big core value for me and my business has been ethics. And it's been interesting for me throughout this past year to see how many people that I have allowed to kind of like come into my space who, if you ask anyone, they're always going to tell you that they're ethical. They're always going to tell you, yes, of course, like this is also a core value for me, because it's actually shameful for someone to say that they're unethical, right? It's not cool. It's not fun. It's not something that is ultra successful for someone to say like, yeah, I'm unethical. But what I've found is that actions totally speak louder than words. And this also comes in with personal relationships that I've experienced over the past year. When someone is acting in a different way than what it is that they're saying that they're going to do. So when they're saying one thing, but they're acting in a completely different way, what you need to do is you need to observe their actions versus rely on their word. And I'm going to let that sink in because this comes in so many different types of relationships. This comes in romantic relationships. This comes in friendships. This comes in family relationships. This comes in teams. And it even comes, like a lot of this is even a form of abuse, right? And when we can observe what someone does versus go off of what someone says, it's so much more powerful because then we start to see, hey, you said this one thing, but your actions don't actually align with the thing that you said. And once you can hold someone accountable for that, even if it's in your head, even if it's not something that you tell them in specific, you're automatically raising a standard for yourself where you're saying, I don't want to take this in my life. This is not something that I align myself with. This is not a part of who I want to become. I don't want to surround myself with people who are unethical. And I've seen this happen with my team members where I've seen them do specific things where I'm like, yeah, that's not something that's an integrity in my company and in my team. And even specific things that they might say to clients or potential clients. And that has been a huge red flag. And sometimes it's harder to see than others. But usually if you can really observe someone's actions versus their words, you'll get a really great indication of whether or not their actions are in alignment with your core values. And ultimately, if I'm holding myself to the highest possible standards, I need to elevate my community to those high standards as well. And if people within my community, and especially within my close community, are not aligning with those higher standards, then how am I going to be able to bring a company up and scale a company to really impeccable standards if the people who are there aren't A-list players, if the people who are there aren't showing that they have the same alignment of core values? And similarly, the way that I do one thing is the way that I do everything. And so if I'm trying to align myself with super high standards in my business, how am I also aligning my relationships with those high standards? How am I choosing and really understanding the observation of the friendships that I currently have in my life and observing whether or not those people are there for my highest good and those people are going to be able to grow with the growth that I'm planning on doing with my business. And if they're not, you're going to find out so soon in terms of observing the behaviors and observing those actions. And what I find really, really interesting about this as well is that this really has nothing to do with how much money your friends make or anything like that. It's just you can have a friend who is not making almost any money or maybe isn't even super ambitious, and they could be the best emotional support system for you, and you could be the best emotional support system for them. And I remember one time with one of my business coaches, one of my very first business coaches, she was new, so I'll give her that as well. But she did say to me at one point, are any of your friends making more money than you? And I was like, well, I don't think so. She was like, well, I think you need to get a new circle of friends. And to this day, I think a lot of those friends that I had when I spoke to her about this are the same friends, and they probably make the same type of wage. And I really do not care. Because at the end of the day, friendship isn't about only increasing your income circle. What I would say is have new friends and align yourself with new friends who also share a desire to make more money. But then there's also other core values that you can have within your circles that don't necessarily need to be, owning a very, very successful business and empire, let's say, for example. And that was another really interesting and very valuable thing that I've learned over all of this time, is that it's not necessarily that your friends need to look exactly like you do. It's not necessarily that all of your friends need to be entrepreneurs and all of your friends need to be wanting to make like 6 to 7 figures. It's just that they need to have those core values that are the same core values as yours. And if you can align those core values, you can have friends for life and friends that you can always pick up with. And as I kind of look back at all of the friends that I've made throughout the years, I can go back to, probably about a dozen of my really close friends that I have who are kind of all over the world at this point. And I can go and visit them and pick up right where I left off at any point in time. And I think that that's such a beautiful thing in friendships when your values align, because it doesn't necessarily need to be hey, I'm making more money now, or hey, I'm a lot more successful now. Now I can no longer relate to, or now I can no longer talk to these specific people that I've talked to before. It's if those values still align for you, then those people are going to be solid. Those people are going to be such amazing, trustworthy people in your lives. But if as you grow, you increase your standards and then you realize that the friends and the company that you used to keep do not align with your core values, that's when you need to make those hard decisions. That's when you need to understand that some of those people aren't going to be here to stay, and that is okay. And at the end of the day, I think that it's also really important to understand that we don't necessarily need to label these people as toxic individuals. In fact, some of the people that I've probably laid off or, had not the greatest of experiences with in terms of my own business probably have really successful partnerships with other people. And I don't think that any of them are actually toxic. I just think that we don't align. And they might have completely different values and completely different principles that I have, and they might place priorities on completely different things. And that is fine. Because at the end of the day, what I truly believe is not every relationship is only quote unquote toxic. And I feel like in the online space now, it's so easy to just be like, leave toxic friendships. And, that terminology and that language can a lot of the times can be really, really hurtful. But understanding that it's not necessarily just that it's toxic. I mean, sure, there's some people who are, but it's also just understanding that it's just a misalignment. And that person is going to have their friends who align with the values that they have. And that person is probably going to say, oh, well, Sarah was in the wrong, or whoever, that person was in the wrong, not you. And it's because of the fact that we tend to identify with and we tend to associate with people who align to all of those priorities that we have. And if you don't have those same priorities as someone else and you decide to sever a relationship, it doesn't necessarily mean that one person is right and one person is wrong. It just means that you're on completely different playing fields now and you need to grow apart. And I've got to say, although I feel like a part of this episode might feel a little bit judgmental, or it might feel a little bit like superior for a lot of us. I know that if I were to listen to a podcast episode like this a few years ago, I probably would have felt like a flare of superiority because I probably wasn't ready to hear all of the things that I've been talking about in terms of the level of worthiness, the level of deserving, and quote unquote, developing high standards. But I can promise you guys that when you do this and when you do this from a place where you're really taking your ego out of the situation. And that's really what I wanted to say within that last piece as well, is that two people can be right and be completely wrong for each other at the same time, right? So two completely different people can have really amazing, successful businesses or really amazing lives and can not get along because their core values don't align, and that's fine. It doesn't mean that one person is better than the other. And so when we can kind of make sure that we're not taking this from a place of ego and not taking this up from a place of a superiority complex, that's when we can start to understand that, yeah, some people are just not meant to be in our lives. And I can promise you that being on the other side of this and really putting those boundaries in and really acknowledging all of these things, but also acknowledging them that this isn't just from a place of ego and this isn't just from a place of hurt or fear. It's just the most freeing experience. And I'm really excited to see just how much more I can input this, both for myself and for my clients, especially for my advanced clients who are in my wealth expansion method, who are building teams. When you can learn all of this and just truly learn it from like a heartfelt space, the boundaries that you create and the new circles that you surround yourself with just give you such a big boost, because you're no longer worrying about offending those people who weren't meant to be there in the first place. You're no longer tiptoeing around those people because you're so afraid of offending them or you feel like you need to enable them. Now you just have the people that just get it and just understand and can operate at the same level that you operate at, because you hand selected them and you made sure that they actually had a space in your life, because you took time to reflect on these things and you've made the changes necessary so that the people in your closest circles are truly the people who matter and who are meant to be there. Okay. And I want you to really embody this for yourself, because this is going to be the most amazing game changer for you. If you can allow this for yourself, and like my mentor said, if you can allow yourself and truly understand for yourself that you deserve to have an A-list team, both in your business, but also in your personal life, in your intimate relationships, in your romantic relationship, and with your family. So anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this episode. I would love to hear what you think about it, especially because I just feel like this is a little bit more of a controversial episode. So feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. It's at Sara without an H, J Loureiro. So Sara J Loureiro. I would love to hear what you think. If you liked this episode, it would mean the world to me if you hit subscribe and left a comment. And of course, if you have a friend who needs to hear this, and I know that so many of us have that friend, and sometimes we are that friend, feel free to share it along with them as well. So thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Uplevel Your Online Business Show. If you enjoy our show and would like the show notes and free goodies about how to grow your online coaching business, head over to sarajloureiro.com for more information. We hope you'll tune in next time.